Hello and welcome to this third episode of the SAFR Podcast. My name is Alvinder Singh Lally, the host and presenter. Today I'm joined by Yusuf. Thank you very much for coming, Yusuf.
Firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's the first type of digital engagement I've had, so it's great to be here. And I'm a youth advocate. I do a lot in regards to social action, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Yusuf has a lot to talk about. We're going to cover a lot of different things, but first I just want to, before we even get started, you're currently in year 12, is that correct?
Yes.
So you're just college in sixth form at the moment, but you've done so much so far and can't wait for the future ahead. So let's start. Let's look at your journey. So what got you, how are you starting all this? Because when I was in sixth form, I was just playing like GTA 5 and do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, my friends say that a lot to me as well. You know, they'll be playing FIFA and I am a human being as well. I do play and I do all this kind of stuff as well. For me, it started with people, and it started with people who were close to me, people who were around me, whether it's close family, extended family, friends in school, and seeing the issues that affected them, but also affecting me, just hit a spark. And I can't think of one exact moment that got me to a point where I said, no, I need to do something. I want to, get engaged in politics or any kind of youth activism. But it didn't settle right with me as a person, with the values that I have and with the conscience that I have to say something's wrong, but we're just going to sit back. And there were so many issues, in my school. It's around 1/3 of the population of our school on free school meals. If you look into the wider community, we have so many people in Redbridge who are living in poverty and not receiving the help that they need. There's so many different issues, and that's what really drove me to want to engage in this work as well.
Yeah, and how, in terms of when you saw these issues coming about, was that in previous, like how recent was that kind of led you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, so a lot of the work, certain opportunities came my way as I got older, certain things with age limits and whatever not. But I think the earliest I can think of this was in primary school, and the first real leadership opportunity I had was in year 3, I think, and I was in the student council. And at that point in time, the student council wasn't much, and in year 3, my impact was probably negligible. But I think from that point on, it was very basic. It was just, here's are some of the concerns of our pupils, my friends, and just taking it to the teachers. But there wasn't a formal structure. There wasn't, it was tick box exercises. And that's what I've seen a lot in school. And even to this day with some of the projects I'm doing, there are tick boxes in there. And I want to move away from that and make sure that, one, it's meaningful, and two, that it's long lasting. Because it's all well and good having great opportunity, great events, initiatives that die out. But if there's nothing that's there to sustain it, then what's the point? And I think it's taking some of the skills that I've gained over the years and making sure that young people who are in my situation can then take on some of those things and start their own projects and make sure that, that sort of cycle continues, especially within my local community as well.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to pick up from that, is in terms of like sustainability, in terms of the value and the impact it has on the community.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And you also went to, you were in year 3, you were in Redbridge as well? East London?
So yes, so all my life I've lived in Redbridge, East London. And again, if you look at us relative to central areas, when we were coming up here, I was saying to you, London is a very lavish, expensive place. And when you compare it to, by no means is it a ghetto. My area is not a complete ghetto, but it's also not like London. And so I remember going on trips to the museum in London with my classmates, and they'd be like, "Oh, you see that McDonald's? It's so huge. Oh, it's got glass." And the lack of cultural capital that students my age, my own friends had, was shocking. And that's why, through some of my work, I do a lot on education. I do a lot on social inclusion and social mobility. And that for me is really personal, because I've always said that you want to have the best start in life, whoever you are. And if you're not being given the opportunities to drive you to have the most success, then we're doing a disservice to you. And so obviously you have local authorities, boroughs, everyone doing their part. I think it's so crucial to have young people, and I've noticed the difference when we don't have young people engaged in the conversations. It's often very bland. It's, again, tick boxy. But when we have young people, it's led by those lived experiences. And I can certainly testify to that in my own case as well.
Yeah. So would you say there's a lot of youth involvement in the Redbridge sort of council,
yes,
the youth council in particular?
Yeah, definitely. And at the moment we're running for, there's an initiative led by UNICEF, and we're looking at child-friendly boroughs, or before the initiative was called child-friendly cities. And we're currently going for accreditation. I think in the next week or two, we'll have an actual assessment where we'll present as a mock trial, and then we'll have our final judgment delivered as to whether or not our borough is child-friendly or not. And I think this piece of work is so crucial because it's one thing to have systems in place that are befitting for young people and, working to get the best out of them. But it's another thing to then say we've got it formally recognized. And I think that, there are some local authorities who are currently doing this work, but there needs to be a push to make sure it's universally accessible to everyone. And also, one fear of me, even working in Redbridge and, with some of the projects I'm doing, once you get formally recognized for something, do you just stop? And that's the one thing I fear most, because if you stop and say, oh, we've been classed as this, the best, the greatest, then where do the standards then lie? Do you stop, or do you, keep pushing and pioneering to make sure you're in the best of your game and sharing best practice with others around you as well? So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So in terms of your involvement right now as a college student or a sixth form student, how do you just sort of navigate that with, as I'm sure you probably heard the sort of, when you're with these MPs or whatnot, they're like, oh, you're very young and this and that. What do you really know about the world? How do you sort of navigate that?
I mean, for me, again, I go back to lived experience. You cannot underestimate that at all. And that's what sets you apart. When we have meetings with policymakers in Whitehall, or even on a local scale, when you say things like the canteen food is poor, or not everyone who's eligible for free school meals is, applying for it, when it's coming from the young people themselves, it hits, different in a way that they haven't heard before. There's certain things you can get adult to adult, and a young person to adult, you're hearing another perspective. And I think, lived experience is definitely a big part of that. But also times are changing. When, these people were young, social media wasn't a thing. When they were young, things like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, they weren't a thing. So the messages can spread in different ways, and young people are highly responsive to certain outlets. And I think through my own personal experience, making sure that you utilize your platform to project good and to project a message that is, that is current for current times, and addressing issues that do exist, and not everyone is happy to voice them, and not everybody is willing to. But I think if you start with one person, then it's much more easier for people to follow. But going back to your initial question, yeah, definitely, there are challenges, and you're not always taken seriously as a young person. And even we had a recent House of Commons event where we got to speak in Parliament, and there was really, really positive coverage from most news platforms, but there was, again, that negative side. Oh, it's a waste of the taxpayers' money. Oh, look at them in their nice suits and their ties and, talking. And it's the cynicalism that surrounds it, which undermines our voices and the credibility that we have through our own experiences, that someone who's been educated or has this first-class degree or whatever cannot give the same perspective on.
Yeah. Do you sometimes get pushback from like the MPs that are like in more senior positions about, obviously mentioned about like you have the lack of experience, but rather when you say the times have changed, will they come across and say, oh, but you guys are spoiled, you guys have everything on a silver plate?
Yeah.
Do you get that as well?
I mean, not in my own personal experience. From the MPs I've worked with, very much enthusiastic about the work that I'm doing, that we're doing as a youth council, and more broadly nationally. with the National Youth Agency and other stakeholders. They're very much open to it, and I've never had a sort of negative encounter with them. And I think that's part of the game. If you want the policymakers to listen, if you want them to represent and build on what you've said, then there's a mutual exchange, and you need to be able to grow that conversation, build those connections, and take it further. Is it possible that it's happening elsewhere? Yes, definitely. And I think when you're stuck with this preconception and you go into the room thinking, oh, these young people are, they're spoiled, then the conversation is invalid, and the conversation is not going to be as fruitful as it should and could be. So in my own instances, no. Yeah. I haven't come across policymakers like that.
Okay, that's good to hear, because we talk about sort of the next generation of leaders and people in MP positions, and we find most of the MPs they're much older on the timescale. Yourself, for example, one of the things that really sort of sparked my interest in having a conversation with you was the fact that you're doing all this work at such a young age.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you want to aspire to be an MP in the future. And so you gain this experience early on and understanding how you kind of navigate yourself through the different Houses of Parliament, Houses of Commons and stuff, I think is a really fascinating thing.
Yeah.
So let's just dive more into that sort of that journey, like what got you. So we talk about what got you into that, the sort of things you were seeing within the Redbridge area, and so how do you kind of get your foot in the door?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to get your foot in the door when the right opportunities aren't being conveyed to you in the right ways. So often for things like Youth MP or all these other various roles and initiatives you can get involved with, it will be directed through email lists and things like that. And again, that goes back to the idea that when we talk about getting young people engaged and putting their voices at the center of attention, you need to be doing it through their means and getting down to their level. They're not communicating through email chains half the time. They'll be on messages on WhatsApp and other platforms like that. So in that sense, it was difficult. But also at the same time, unlike some of my friends, I do like to use emails and engage in other ways as well. And I mean, the first thing, for example, the Youth MP role, I remember walking around school at one time and I saw posters just planted around the library and around the school. And I said, let's go for it. Let's apply for it. So I sent my application. We then had a series of different workshops on public speaking, on manifesto writing. And from that, it was then whittled down to a select few for interviews. And then from that, it started from around 50 people. And then it went down to 10 people in the ballot boxes, which were obviously where the 10 candidates and students from across the borough got to vote in. And we had a really high turnout. I think it was 11,000, 11 and a half, oh no, maybe 12,500. You need to fact check that. But we did get a really overwhelming amount of responses. And I think that's a testament in itself. Obviously, that got me into my foot in the door to this role. But at the same time, it also helped to send a signal to Redbridge and even wider to the UK that young people are engaged. And if they're given that avenue to tick that box to vote for the person who represents their priorities, then they will go for it. But you need to facilitate that. As for other opportunities, again, it's ad hoc. And a lot of that takes your initiative. It's not like everything's coming my way. I have to, spend hours searching and, it's trying to optimize the search results, like youth social action or whatever else. And then just, filling those applications, doing those interviews and building those connections with, different organizations and even charities as well.
Yeah. And you've been part of the House of Commons for about a year now, is that correct?
Yeah, probably a year. And one of the pieces of work I'm doing currently is with the APPG on youth affairs, so the All Parliamentary Party Group. I think I've got that right. And there is young people, there is MPs and other stakeholders who come around a table every few months, and then we talk about what's current. So, for example, the National Youth Strategy, which the government's currently rolling out, they hope to have the largest consultation of young people that we've seen. And in those conversations, it's things like the access to work experience, and that comes up a lot. And and I don't know if I've got it here, but there's a sheet of paper here. And when I talk about social mobility and education, I genuinely do care about it. And that's some of the things I'm talking about in these meetings with the policymakers. I'm saying there's great initiatives run by this organization and this charity that level the playing field and give young people that agency to achieve what it is that they want to achieve, and do what they want to do. And they're not just community-based and community-led, but they're also data-driven. So they're looking at what schemes are working the best. I'm currently doing some work with Speakers for Schools on their youth council, and they run 2 different initiatives, one online work experience with the option for in-person, and then they've also got things like inspirational speakers coming into schools. That's helping to bridge the divide and the cultural capital aspect. If you go to a private school, if you go to a well-recognized school, then you're already set up for success in a sense, because you can testify and you can put that name to your CV or whatever else it is. But young people from state schools, we don't have that. So when we're engaging with these influential people and making sure that they're coming in at a grassroots level into schools, into youth centers and youth hubs, then we can really get the best out of them and make sure that they're, that we're not leaving them behind. No man left behind.
Yeah, that's incredible to hear, really. I think a lot of what you talk about, what you're passionate about in terms of your advocacy work is about social mobility.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much of an issue do you think it is in current politics or wider society? 10 being like something we need to take action on immediately, and 0 kind of just being, it could, it's not necessarily a massive issue.
Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't say 10, but as for what you define it, 10 being we need to change it. Yes, 100%. We need to change it. We need to do it quickly. If you compare ourselves to other countries in the EU, can't remember the exact statistic, but to get out of generational poverty, the years it takes in the UK relative to some of the Nordic countries is absurd. And if we're sitting there saying that it's okay for this to continue, then it's wrong. I definitely think that the government needs to act. And I think the National Youth Strategy is one way about going about it, but it's also about sharing best practice and making sure that it's being facilitated continuously between all these various organizations who are at the forefront of it, such as the ones I mentioned. But it's definitely a real issue. And especially when you go to areas of high crime and deprivation, it starts with the living standards at home. Crammed spaces, easy to spread the flu. Things like that mean students are absent from lessons. They're missing out on learning. They're falling behind. They get excluded. Then it's hard to get back into the school system. And each of those barriers makes it, I know somebody personally who is not in school at the moment, and trying to get back onto the education system is so difficult. So even for things like that, I think it's crucial to make sure we're giving the opportunity to young people to engage with that. And it's certainly a problem. And that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing in whatever capacity I can.
Yeah. I've got two questions, but it kind of molds into one. So the first one, you kind of touched on it, but what are some of the factors that are leading to the lack of social mobility? Second one was, what are some things that we can do to help? When I say we, I'm talking about the government.
Yeah.
What are some steps that you think they could take to create a solution sooner rather than later?
Okay, so social mobility, one, as I mentioned, if you look at cultural deprivation, that's things like some parents not having the knowledge to take their children to the museums at a young age, or taking them to educational, enriching experiences. 2, there's the material deprivation, not having the finances, not having the pencils, the books, not being able to afford them. And some of the work I do is with care experienced young people, and we work a lot with the virtual schools in the local authority, where there is a delay in getting those resources to them. I also work with young people with special educational needs. And if you see at the moment how long it takes for them to get their EHCP plans processed, it's ridiculous. We're holding them in limbo before they can even get in and start working. So that's another thing. 3, it's role models as well. When you look at, and when I look, for example, at the House of Commons and how it's made up. Now it's one of the most diverse parliaments we've seen in some years now. But think of it in this way: when you look to, the healthcare professions, the NHS, politics, wherever your interest lies, engineering, if you don't see someone who looks like you, the same skin, who wears the same apparel as you, or who speaks like you do, you're disillusioned, right? And so that's another thing, is the disillusionment as a result of there not being the right role models. Now, I'm not saying that we need to make sure that we have X, Y number of people from this background in there. It is a meritocracy. It should be the people who are best fit for it. But at the same time, you do need to think to yourself, if you haven't got people from the Black community, from the Asian community in the corridors of power, what message does that send? Whose views? My teacher says white, pale, stale is what we see with certain legislators. And it's true. And it does send a message. In terms of what we can do to change that, one, we need to heavily endorse those initiatives by charities who are pushing for social mobility, the Social Mobility Foundation, Speakers for Schools, Young Professionals, all of these different organizations. Two, we need to make sure it's accessible and readily so. Three, it's sharing best practice, not just on a national or local basis, but also taking what other countries are doing. If you look at, again, the Nordic countries, the way that they lay out they timetable their lessons is different to how we timetable it. And if you see their results and their attainment there, it's also different. So I'm not saying we change the whole system, but if we can take certain elements out of it, I think we could be heading in a really positive direction.
Yeah. I think it sounds really interesting what your proposals are and the things that you think that could be improved and things that could work also. I think it's very healthy to hear from your perspective. In terms of the other pieces of work that you're doing, because you're not just doing that, you're also involved in a lot of other things. So it'd be lovely for you to share that as well.
Yeah, so aside from social mobility, I would say another piece of work, so I briefly touched about care experience young people. I was involved in a project with the London Borough of Haringey and their Corporate Parenting Advisory Committee, or CPAC for short. And we were going around contact centres and seeing the facilities. So for those who don't know what contact centres are, they're places where young people who are a stranger or not with their families meet them, every so often. And we saw the conditions of them run down, scratch walls, outdated, things, not the right toys and equipment fit for different age groups. And we said that's wrong, firstly. And by we, I'm talking about the youth council on the side of Haringey. And we said, if you had your child and you wanted them to engage with people that they're not seeing for a long, long time, how do you want them to feel? What do you want there to be on offer? If there's just Connect 4, not every young person is interested in that. If it's just chess, not every young person's interested in that. And we need to cater for people from all sort of age brackets. So what we did is we took those proposals. We said there needs to be more tech. We need TVs in there. We need consoles, things that young people actually enjoy and will have a good time bonding with their families. We made those proposals to the Director of Children's Services and the counsellors. And before you know it, they implemented all those things. And now what we're looking at is making sure that there's a charter to expand what we've done there at the Maya Angelou Centre, that renovation, and make sure that it's open to all of the other contact centres in the local area. And I think it's such a fantastic piece of work that, we could be taking to other local authorities as well. That's with regards to care experience young people. I do some work with the NHS and the healthcare service, where we're currently looking at things like mental health and what support is available both in the first-hand NHS and also preventative measures. So, for example, in schools, what schools have access to trained and qualified therapists? Not many. And actually, the trend that we see is you might have one qualified therapist who is split between 2 or 3 different schools, so they can't see their young people as consistently and on demand as when we need it. And that doesn't work out, because if you're a young person in a crisis or facing emotionally challenging issues, then you need to be able to have that support line. And sometimes it's not your friends, sometimes it's not the safeguarding leads and whoever else it is in school. Just making sure that somebody who knows what they're doing is put there, not just a teacher with a badge, speak to them. So I do different work with social mobility, care experience young people, the healthcare system, and education as a whole as well.
Yeah. So what is the objective with all this work that you're doing? I mean, I know you're still in college, but do you plan to go to university afterwards? Do you plan to become an MP, or what's the sort of result that you're looking for?
Yeah. So from this, I do want to get into education and study something along the lines of politics, economics, and then moving on from that, people ask, do you want to become a politician? Do you want to become this or that? I do. I want to become a politician. And I'm also happy with becoming anybody in the community who's able to push for change. It doesn't have to be an MP, it can be a councillor, it can be somebody in a charity. But whatever it is that I wish to pursue, making sure that I stay true to what I'm doing now. And that's why I'm trying to keep it as consistent as possible, because the last thing I want to do is, that drops out. And where I stand, my values always, come first. And when I'm fighting for this now, I'm fighting for it later on in whatever capacity, as long as I can make a change.
You talked about values quite a bit. I think that's quite nice. But could you remind us what the values are specifically? And also, where were these values instilled? Is it from a culture or religion, or was it your family?
Yeah, so I say one of those is integrity. When you're doing things, make sure you're doing it for the right reason. I'm not here for publicity, even coming here. I'm not here for accolades. We spoke about this before. I'm solely here to do the work that I can in my capacity and inspire other young people in positions like me to push the boundaries for what is normal in the communities. And by that I mean looking at alternatives that we haven't approached in the way we provide youth services, but also more broadly other societal issues that we face, homelessness and whatever else, you name it. So integrity is the first one. The second one is honesty. I think when we see politicians, there's a disalignment, and often they say, "Oh, we're going to make these promises," and they put things in the manifesto and they do all of that sort of thing. But for me, lying is a very bad thing, and these values are driven by a combination of things. One, it's through culture. I'm based from Egyptian heritage. Part of that is religious values, so Islamically, and then a part of that is family, and it's an amalgamation of all of those things coming together. But ultimately, it's because I'm human, and it's right for any human to have those self-principles in place. I mentioned honesty, I mentioned integrity, but also courage is another thing. Having the courage to speak out and to say, here's what's wrong. Let's work together constructively, and try to redefine what said thing means, and how we can work around it to bring about a better outcome that is currently existing. So they're just some of the values that I have. Responsibility is another thing that comes to mind, and that should be universal. Everyone in your community, it doesn't matter what position you're in, it doesn't matter what title, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter. And one thing I really don't like is sometimes people will come up to me in school, my friends mainly, and they'll say, "Oh, it's the Prime Minister," in a jokey way, or they'll call me by some sort of title, anything like that. I'm not here for that, and I genuinely couldn't care less what position you give me. And I think that's such an important thing to note. It's about staying true to who you are, and having that humility, and having that social and cultural awareness in all different situations, and being you, and being human, and respecting other people, and conveying that respect throughout all your actions. It's not like I'm going to show respect here to you and I'm not going to show respect to you. Respect should be universal. All of these values should be universal. And when you look at the world at the moment, when you look at the country at the moment, it really does sadden you. It certainly makes me upset that we see certain issues in our society either building up or existing from many years, only worsen over time. So I think they're the values we should all adopt. And I think religion across the board has a really good and vital role to play in that. There are people who don't believe in religions, and that's fine. There are people who are Sikhs, who are Muslims, who are Christians, who are atheists. And I'm constantly in conversation about that. You know, I hear some religious groups saying, oh, but they're wrong, or, you know, we don't agree on everything, and that's fine. But it's finding common ground, and it's knowing that, you know, regardless of the differences, there are so many similarities, and values is part of that. And if we can work to be a more inclusive society where we acknowledge people's differences and we get on with it, we may not agree with everything, but agree to disagree in a fair and respectful manner. That's a principle that I hold dear to me all the way through. I've worked with people from all sorts of backgrounds, walks of life. I don't always agree with everything that they say or that they project, but it's having that ability to say, okay, and trying to understand their viewpoints further, but also challenging them when they might differ, but doing it in a way that's appropriate as well. That's really fundamental.
Yeah, I think you really summed that up really beautifully, actually. It just, again, it makes you kind of think that we do live in London, a very diverse area with different perspectives, different backgrounds and experiences. And I think the fact that you mentioned the 4 values that, you know, it comes from your family, your community, and from your religion of Islam. I think everything you said really nails it on the head, especially in the society we live in. But I'm curious, when we talk about, for example, like British values, because we do live in England, we live in the British culture. Exactly. With the sort of shift in sort of narrative of what's happening with the country, and, you know, people are saying that the UK as a whole is on decline in terms of the cost of living crisis, the social situations, the safety in London as well. I think it's gone, the past 5 years especially, like it's become a very unsafe area for a lot of people. And I know from personal experience of friends that were involved in incidents, whether it be like violent attacks or sexual harassment. So when we try and sort of encompass all these values together, how do we kind of create this cohesive values? I know you talk about it being human values, but how do we make it so that it's adopted by everybody that lives in the country?
First thing I'll say, I know people as well, you know, people outside my doorstep who have been stabbed. I know people have been beaten to death. I know people who are involved in those postcode wars. And crime is definitely a huge issue as well. I think in terms of having social cohesion, you're never going to have it perfect. And even in today's day and age, when you have so many agencies pushing for greater mutual understanding and tolerance, there's always going to be those fractions that say, no, I'm not having that. It starts in the home, and this is where I think parents have a really huge responsibility as well. From young, you need to be able to instill that sense of, here are your personal beliefs and here are your personal values, but here are things at large. You're a British citizen. You're a citizen of the globe. And here are things that you should adopt into your daily life. You have your personal things, religious, cultural, and that's for you. And parents have a huge thing to do about it, because you go to school and the messages that you hear, the words, the rhetoric you see from certain students, and you think, why are you saying that? Where's the thought process? Do you not see how that's now affected another person? And at the end of the day, it goes back to the family, because I think family ultimately have a really huge responsibility, and parents do. And when we look at particularly the early years, if you can seize that opportunity at the 4 to 7 bracket and really push your, not agenda, if you push you socialize them correctly in the home, then once they go to nursery, once they go to reception, those behaviors start to play out. And that's when the school comes in. How much time do we spend in schools relative to our families? Hours a day. We see our family for the last portion of the evening and the night, and then we're back to school the next day, and it repeats. So schools also have that, and above schools it's the government. And with this curriculum and education review that they're looking at, which I'm also involved with, one of the big focuses for us is on current issues. So things like climate change, how our actions are affecting those across the globe, our consumption, vehicles, things like that. But also citizenship. And many schools, I think, loads of schools have citizenship going on. But it's not just about saying we're teaching this, but it's also making sure that it's a high quality, high standard. And one of the conversations we had with a charity I work with called SOS UK, who's leading this review, what some of the panelists said is, when we have maths, we're taught by somebody who is accredited in teaching maths. When we have science, we're taught by somebody who knows science. English, taught by English. So when we look at citizenship, why can you just bring in a cover teacher to teach it? Surely they should be qualified. Surely it should be formalized in the way in which we learn it. And I think, for example, in my school, what we get right is social action and having a social conscience, not just developing our academic ability and being able to move forward to apprenticeships, to university and whatever else, but also being part of the community. And schools have such a vital role. If it's failing at the home, then schools need to intervene. But not all schools, and we know that capacity now, that there's so little that they can do. So it's also down to the government and the local education authorities to step in and say, here are the bespoke solutions. Let's have a conversation. And also it's getting the young people involved. This is, with this curriculum review, initially it was just set out to be adults involved. And then they had the youth shadow panel review, which I'm part of. And we've had a meeting with the official panel. We brought our ideas. We published an interim report and due to do another report. The point being that in these conversations, with regards to education, young people need to be involved with that. But more broadly, government needs to take responsibility for setting the baseline standard for schools, and parents need to set the standard at home. If you misbehave in school, they'll be like, I'm sure your parents didn't teach you that. I'm sure you didn't grow up in that way. So why are you doing it? And you need to be able to set that precedent early on, so that we're not seeing that these behaviors turn into anti-school subcultures and people go out doing drugs, doing counting lines, doing whatever else. So family and in the home is key. Then it will be the schools, but the schools are also dependent on the government to facilitate and open up and ease those pressures that they currently face as well. So it's a combination of all of those together.
It very much sounds like a holistic cycle between all the family, the schools, the government. Like they kind of work hand in hand. So even if the government's performing fantastically, if the schools and the family don't have those fundamental sort of principles, exactly. So all of us kind of need to work in cohesion with each other. That's very fascinating. I've never thought of it that way. I've always thought it's just the school's fault, but we don't look at the sort of the more internal aspects of family and such. But it's very insightful. I think one of the sort of final questions I did have was about as a youngster yourself, what would you encourage people that while watching this, they're quite inspired, they want to do something? What would be a word of advice for youngsters wanting getting into the same sort of field that you're doing right now? And if they don't have that sort of mobility in terms of they don't have support from their family or their schools, are there organizations they can reach out to? Or
I would say the first thing is start somewhere. And in doing so, it could be a really small step. It could be going to your teacher and asking, is there anything going on in school, the student council, or could I mentor the new year 7s coming in, or any sort of initiative like that. Then it's taking it further. And not everybody needs to do 101 different things. And sometimes they say quality is better than quantity. So you don't need to think, and this is part of the media as well. The media will project those standards. This is how you need to be. He's got the car, he's got the watch, she's already in this profession, she's leading that. And it puts you in a place where you're like, okay, they're doing this, and I'm still here. And my journey, like I said, broadly speaking, it started in primary school. But in terms of things that were more tangible, that started in around secondary school. And for me, personally, I think that's late. Other people disagree, but I think it's late. And on that note, it's never too late to start. and just get involved. If you have a local youth council, reach out to them. If you don't know how to reach out to them, go to your schools, and I'm sure they can facilitate that. If you're interested in youth councils, go on Google, search youth councils, join, application, things like that. Have a look, browse of what's of interest. And when you take that initiative and you take those leaps of faith that start, then you just keep on going. But you need to start somewhere, no matter how large or how great it is, right? Nothing is too good, and you need to start somewhere. The worst thing you can do is procrastinate. Oh, I want to get the best result as soon as possible. Then you don't end up anywhere. If you can clean up the classroom when people leave, tuck in the chairs, that's a start. If you can say good morning, that's a start. But start somewhere, because the last thing you want is to be left there having the right intentions. And there's a saying, somebody wanted to change the world, but he couldn't do that. So he went to his country, he couldn't even change that. So he went down to his local community, he couldn't change that. And at the end of the day, he realized he had to start in his home. So you don't need to think about the broad picture all the time. Sometimes it's about the inner self and making sure that, one, you're okay, and that you're in a position to do something, and then starting slowly, but never rush into it. Have the ambition and have the courage to do so. But if you're not ready, don't stress about it, and start slowly. And then you'll get recognized, and then you'll have people saying, oh, this person's actually involved in this. But no one becomes a millionaire overnight. Nobody, becomes this sensation over any short period of time. It takes work, and you need to develop that craft in any capacity as well.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Yusuf. I really appreciate your time and honesty. It's been a great session. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate having me. Thank you.
Yes.